Again, thank you to all three panelists for being here today. So we'll go ahead and get started, and again, the panel should be about 50 minutes to an hour, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So, if you would, please share your primary responsibilities in your job and what your day-to-day work looks like.
Okay, so at the Museum of Science, I'm part of the bigger marketing team. So we can call it external communications, right? So I am the only person right now who's doing PR. So my day-to-day basically could be, it could be almost anything. It's completely different every single day. It runs the gamut from answering requests. I'm responsible for coordinating filming and photography that happens at the museum because there's a lot of kids there, obviously, so we have to be really careful about that. Pitching stories, going to meetings, strategy, planning the strategic guidelines for announcements we want to make, all of that. I am part of the social media team. I get to weigh in on ad campaigns. It's all kinds of things. One of the really cool things about the museum is it's a small team, it's a close-knit team, so I get to sort of dip my toe into all kinds of things. But for the most part, it's good old-fashioned PR, answering reporters, hunting them down, writing press releases, writing media advisories, raising awareness, and driving attendance.
So my days are pretty hectic. So I run all of our social media, and I do public awareness campaigns. So my day starts, I walk into my office and get a coffee, and then I sit down and do social media monitoring. So our number one hashtag is #alls. So I check all of our social media platforms, go through the hashtag #alls, and I like everything that people use the hashtag on, and to gain us followers and gain us likes and everything like that. And then I look for stories to post on our social medias, and I do that, and then I get a ton of graphic design requests during the day, so I try and bust those out as they come in, but I mean it can be anywhere from I need this on a billboard to I'm just doing a newspaper ad. So I do all of those requests. And I also do public relations, press releases. So right now we're big on, we have a lot of runners in the Boston Marathon. So I am pitching stories about the runners and their connection and where they're running, and I put out all of those, and then it's just craziness from the day, from the second I walk in until the second I leave. And there's a lot of stuff in between that too, so videos, posting pictures, taking pictures, and anything you can think of public relations.
So first, thanks for inviting me, and I'm glad to have a chance to speak to the students. The Mass Cultural Council, just so you know, is a state agency, so we were created in response to the creation of the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the subsequent establishment of 50 state arts and humanities agencies. So we're a government agency in a sort of unique position in Massachusetts state government. The best way to describe it to someone who's not familiar with us is we are the connecting tissue between state government and the nonprofit arts and cultural sector, arts, humanities, and sciences. And so we have a $14 million annual budget and then a $10 million capital campaign. We're really the voice for the arts on Beacon Hill. So I'm part of a senior leadership team that includes an executive director, a deputy director, an operations director, and we have a robust agenda that we work through week to week. We have an advocacy campaign agenda that works through the course of the year, so we're trying to fight for resources for the nonprofit cultural community through the state budget process, through the various capital campaigns, through economic development legislation, sometimes through education, so to ensure the arts have a place at the table at education debates. So a lot of my work is about positioning arts and culture as an important contributor to the health and vitality of the Commonwealth. So I'm communicating a lot with individual legislators. I'm working with a nonprofit advocacy organization, working with other partners in the philanthropic community, and then on the sort of the nuts and bolts, we have our agencies. As I mentioned, we're a senior leadership team. We have about 30 staff members, and then we have local cultural councils. So every city and town around the Commonwealth has a local cultural council, 329 of them. So we have a whole series of communications tools. We have several websites, several e-newsletters, social media, Twitter, and Facebook, of course, but also we have a Tumblr site, and now we're trying to get into Instagram. And so my day is probably just as hectic as my colleagues up here, and it depends on it's very cyclical in terms of the state budget process and the other work that we're doing, but it involves kind of connecting. At the core, it's really about connecting the cultural sector to the work of state government and connecting our elected leaders and ensuring that they understand the value that arts and culture bring to their constituents.
Thank you for summarizing that concisely, and I think in summary we can say you do everything at your organizations. So the next question is about the decisions that you make every day. If you were to reflect on the decisions that you make at work and the decisions that you make about work and career choices, what values do you usually fall back on to make these decisions?
So for me, we just went through a strategic planning process. We every 5 years, as my boss likes to say, every 7 years we do a 5-year strategic plan. Strategic plan is joking, but we do a strategic plan every 5 years, and part of that process as a public agency is you go out and you try to engage your communities. In this case, it's artists, it's cultural organizations, it's networks of people working in the arts community, and you reaffirm your mission as an organization, and you hopefully reimagine what your potential is as an organization. So I always start with our mission. So our mission is to foster a rich and healthy cultural life for the Commonwealth, and and then we have, as part of that, with a mission and a vision and a set of values, and those are my kind of touchstones. And when I think about the work of my department, the communications department, and our leadership team, that's where we look. We go back to the mission and the vision, and also as part of the strategic plan, we've got specific goals, and we go back to those periodically to make sure that we're meeting them and that we're working towards them, and so really that's where I begin, and then I, as I said, I think about the constituents who we serve as an agency. Try to think about what is best for them, what are they looking for, how do we make sure we understand those things, and that's kind of the foundation for our decision making.
I was going to say the same thing. I always look at our vision and our mission. We serve families dealing with Alzheimer's and dementia in any way, shape, and form. So I always look back on our vision, which is a world without Alzheimer's. So I just think of whatever I'm putting out there, it's for the families, it's for awareness, it's for everyone that we serve. It's not for me, it's not what I want to see, it's for the families that we are serving.
I totally echo that. You really have to know the mission, you have to understand it, you have to work with it in mind. We see that at the Museum of Science as well. On a more like practical day-to-day level, one thing that I do to sort of help my decision making is you just really have to stay tapped in. It can get tiring to read and watch the news nonstop and to constantly be honing your writing skills. It can feel tedious sometimes, but you really have to. So that, I think that helps me having the feeling that I sort of know what's happening in the world outside of the bubble of the Museum of Science. I think helps me make better decisions for the museum. For example, you wouldn't want to announce something Monday morning after the Super Bowl. People aren't at their computers, they're not writing stories, there's nothing happening except talking about the Super Bowl. So but to make that decision months in advance, you have to know, okay, that's Super Bowl Sunday. Now that's an easy one because pretty much everyone knows that. But there's there's other things, like just another example is we had an exhibit open a few years ago, and it was in the midst of sentencing of the trial of the marathon. So I get this note, we want to send out this press release today. And I'm like, we're not sending out a press release about our waterfall today. You know, like you just have to be able to tap into the environment. What are people talking about? You have to be on Twitter, you have to be on, you have to be everywhere. And that can be tedious, but if you make it just a part of your routine, you get home and put the news on, it's not always pleasant, but you gotta know what people are talking about. And so I think that really helps, especially obviously in PR marketing. That gives me the confidence that I'm making good decisions because I sort of feel like I know what's going on.
Great, thank you. So what are some of the most rewarding and or challenging aspects of your job?
So same thing for both questions is putting out such big public awareness campaigns. So we recently did one, it's actually happening now, so if you see an Alzheimer's billboard or ad on the T or whatever, I made that. It's terrifying to know how many people are going to see these ads and they're like, oh my God, did I spell Alzheimer's wrong? Looking at it 5,000 times to be like, oh my God, okay, all right, E for the I, like, all right, everything's good, putting it out there. But it's so rewarding because I don't think that I just get the request, okay, we need X amount of billboards made, we need X amount of bulletins made, and I just do it and I put it out there. And I got a call from my aunt, she's like, I just saw a billboard, did you make that? I'm like, oh my God, yeah, yes, I did make that. And the thing that you're seeing, that huge thing on the road, yes, I made that. And I don't think about that at all. Like, I just do the work and I put it out there and I make sure it's right. But it's so rewarding, but so terrifying.
So in some ways, I'm very fortunate because, you know, I get to, not often, but I get to occasionally see the direct result of our investment in the work. So a couple of weeks ago, we had an event with some of our youth development and arts education programs in Boston. We had a gathering, we had some legislators, Sonia Chang Diaz, who's the Senate chair of the Education Committee, joined us. And we had a performance from the students from the Boston String Academy, which are in this intensive music education program that we seed funded and have really kind of been a key investor in. And you see these kids, late elementary to middle school age kids, playing a piece by Handel with, I mean, these kids are from, most of them are from, you know, low-income families, a lot of them English language learners, new immigrant families, and working with these teachers, and number one, the skill that they conveyed in playing, but also the pride in which they played. It's incredibly moving, and to know that, you know, the work that I do played a role in that is deeply gratifying, and I do get to see that. So I'm really fortunate. That the most challenging thing is that I found over the course of doing this for many years is that not enough of our key decision makers have had that experience, or they're not able to make the connection between a small investment through the state budget and the outcomes that those kids have. And you know, it's not to blame the political leadership. There's tremendous pressure on them, and there are a lot of public goods that they have to support. But when you see, you know, the impact of the arts on the young person's life and their life trajectory, you know that this is a good investment. So the art part is, you know, of course, every legislator will tell you I'm supportive of the arts, but it's getting them to that point where they really can be a champion and take it to that next level, so that investment really is at the level that it deserves. So that's the biggest challenge.
I would say for nonprofits, I think in general, but certainly because of using budget is hard. You want to make a great commercial and have it, you know, during the Oscars, but you can't. So you have to find other ways to get your message out. It's always rewarding because it feels good, like it's great. Like we want everyone to know that all these initiatives we have and all these great things we offer. The hard part is it takes all the work. And one thing I can say about museums in particular is it's kind of like a cruise ship. Like, it's like you can only move at 1 degree at a time. So like I was a reporter before, so you we did everything within, it's this quick. So then it's just a little slower. So you might think you have this great idea, and you might get told no 10 times, but if you really think it's a good idea, you have to keep like pushing that rock up the hill, because there's not going to be money and there's not going to be time. You're not going to have enough staff. And but if it's worth it, you know, then you have this, you end up with this great program or this great piece or a page on the website that's ways to save, and it helps people. And so ultimately it's all good, but it can be tedious.
Great, thank you. So how does Boston size up to other areas and communities for philanthropy? What are the opportunities for students to get involved in nonprofit careers?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a tremendous environment for the nonprofit sector as a whole. I mean, I can speak mostly to arts and culture, but these guys maybe a little bit more broadly. But you know, the greater Boston, Massachusetts as a whole has one of the richest cultural environments in the United States, maybe the world. Boston obviously is the home to enormous and substantial nonprofit arts institutions, from the the big guys like the Museum of Fine Arts, the Boston Symphony Orchestra, the Museum of Science. I mean, these are world-class institutions doing cutting-edge work. But the other sort of the lesser-known element of the cultural sector is the smaller community organizations. All across the Commonwealth. There are amazing museums and dance companies and theaters out in the Berkshires. There are artist collectives doing really amazing work in places like Lowell and New Bedford. And there are institutions all over the state. So there really, really are tremendous opportunities. And of course, the other opportunity here, but it's a challenge, is the nonprofit cultural community is facing big challenges from demands on everybody's time with in the digital age. It's so much easier to get your entertainment at home from Netflix and on your phone than it is to take the time to go and see a live theater production or a symphony orchestra. And that's only going to get more difficult for nonprofit arts organizations. So they have to continually, and Aaron, you can speak to some of this in the science world, but continually make themselves relevant, compelling, and interesting to your generation and subsequent generations. And that is going to take really thoughtful, strong communication. And so that's why this work, the intersection of arts and culture and communications, is central to the success of the sector.
My advice would be volunteer, go to these places, volunteer, get internships, all the internships you can get, and become patrons of your arts, local arts and theater, museums. Go visit them, follow them on social media, just engage. It helps, obviously, the institutions. It will inform you sort of in the direction that these places go. And if you are interested in nonprofit work, the more you engage with them, I think the better off you'll be.
Thank you. So you all talked earlier about the importance of knowing your communities so that you can be better communication professionals. So the next question is about generally, is there an organization out there, perhaps a nonprofit, that does communication really well, that you personally aspire to do similar work, or perhaps your organization aspires to do similar work?
I find myself on the social media of other health nonprofits. So I go on American Heart, and I go and I look at all like the breast cancer awareness campaigns. And when I was doing logistics for the Walk to End Alzheimer's, I was on like the breast cancer walks, and I was looking at everything that they were doing and what are we not doing that they are doing. And I was able to, pick up some tips from them and just say to my, bosses and say, I think that we need to incorporate some of this stuff because we're kind of missing out, and we're here and we need to be here on some of the stuff that we're doing. And it's really good to even just see their social media. It was literally 2 days ago that I was on the American Heart Facebook page, because I was like, "Ugh, I feel like I just keep writing the same things over and over and over again. What are they doing? Are they doing social media campaigns? Are they changing up their hashtags? What are these other health nonprofits doing?" So it definitely helps to look and see, what other organizations are doing, just so that you're at your best always.
So my former employer is the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, and they, I think, have really done an excellent job of telling a compelling story about the unique experience that museum provides to visitors, and they do it in multiple ways. Their web and their digital content, their social media, and then the experience itself. For a museum, the marketing doesn't end when you go through the door, right? It's about the experience that they have when they're at the museum, from beginning to end. And so I think, they do a particularly good job. So that's an institution I continue to admire.
Okay, so now we're gonna shake things up and we're gonna play a little game, and it's called Fill in the Blank. Okay, the questions get progressively harder. Kidding, they don't. Okay, so before getting into a nonprofit communication field, students should know blank.
How to write everything, press releases, blurbs, news stories, blogs. The better the writer, the better your experience will be. It'll make it easier, it'll make you more hireable, it'll make you more dynamic and helpful to your team. Write everything, write for your school paper, write your Instagram captions, like everything you can write, practice.
So I would say the difference between earned media and paid media, just because you should know that for like budgeting and stuff like that. So earned media is like all your social media and like everything that you can do, and then paid media is stuff that you're paying for. So all the billboards I talked about, we had to pay for those. Our public awareness campaign commercials, we had to pay for those. We had to get donations for those. So just knowing the difference between those and how you can utilize your earned media over your paid media, because your earned media you can manage yourself.
I have a different kind of answer to this question, but pose it again. I want to make sure I get it right.
Before getting into a nonprofit communication field, students should know blank.
Yourself. And the reason I say this is because the best communicators are those who are passionate about what they're talking about. So, I was, the first part of my career, like you guys, was a journalist, and I loved being a journalist. And I always thought of my career trajectory in journalism. But things were changing in the journalism world. I was working like a dog. I was working late at night. I was covering a lot of political stuff. My son was growing up, and I was spending less and less time with him. And the Peabody Essex Museum offered me the job as their director of PR, as they were about to ramp up this big building transformation campaign. And at first I was like, no way, I did not want to do PR. I would consider it a sellout. That was the parlance of journalism at that time. But then I thought about the institution and what it represented and the opportunity that it provided to me. And I love museums. I always have since I was a kid. My mother was an artist, and so I had that sort of background. And I was able to transition and be successful there, like I have been here, because I truly believe in the work. I'm sure you guys can say the same thing. You believe in it, and as a result, you convey authenticity. And that's rule number one in communications and public relations. So know yourself and know what you're passionate about. And if you can, it's not easy, if you can translate that into a career in the nonprofit world, that's the best of all worlds.
I'm going to like all three of your social media accounts if you have them, because you are just fabulous. Okay, the biggest misperception in the nonprofit world is blank.
that they're not smart business people. They are smart business people, but the nonprofit world is a different model. And they're not, they don't do this to make money. In fact, most nonprofits lose money. That's part of the game, but it's okay because they're accomplishing their mission. So that's a quick answer.
I would just say, like for the museum, and I think probably the same goes for theater, people think because they bought a ticket that there's no need, you know. It's not like, you know, Universal or Disney, like, we didn't make money off your ticket, like, that got the lights on, you know. So like, you have to pay to engage, but we actually, there's just so much more fundraising that needs to be done beyond that to keep up.
Okay, so if you were to meet your 20-year-old self, in addition to telling that person to probably party less, you would give them blank advice.
Find out now, talk to someone who you trust, a parent, an aunt, uncle, a professor, a mentor, and ask them about rent, and about credit cards, and about car insurance, and interest and taxes, and health benefits. These are all things that you need to know. Nobody tells you, if you don't ask, turns out. And you'll be a lot better off if you have a healthier appreciation of budgeting and finance and sort of all the things that you don't know yet, because there's a lot of them.
So I would say 2 things to myself. First of all, get it together. Second of all, I would say it's all going to be okay. When I was 20, I had no idea what I was going to do. I had absolutely no idea. I was undecided at Lasell for the longest time. I had no idea. And everything just kind of fell into place. The role that I was in when I first got this job was not what I wanted to be doing in the least bit. I felt wore down. I felt like I just wanted to do something else. And I was this close to giving up, but I just knew what I wanted to do, and I put that into the work that I was doing, and that's what got me the job I'm in now in the same company. So I just stuck with it. But if I had known that everything was going to be fine when I was 20, I would have done a lot better.
Yeah, that's all good advice. So I covered some of that, some of the answer to that earlier, but the other thing I'd say is really cherish your years here as a student, because this is such a unique time in your life, and you have such unique opportunities to learn and to grow as a person. And for me, I had a good college experience, but it could have been a lot better if I had drunk a lot less beer. So we'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so we promised you this will get a little bit harder. So this is a song pop culture question. So let's see. So these are lyrics from a song. That are about community, by the way. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as blank.
We just wanted to make sure everyone was paying attention. That was Don's idea. I think it was a great one. Okay, so the most memorable intern you have ever worked with had blank qualities.
So the intern I'm working with now, she actually is a Lasell student. She's a freshman. She is amazing. She is on top of everything, but she's not afraid to ask questions, which I love. So instead of trying to let me Google this, let me try and figure it out on my own and wasting all that time, she'll just come right up to me and be like, what the heck did you mean when you sent this email? I have no idea what those words are. So she will just come right up to me, ask me all the questions she needs to, and it's better for me, it's better for her. She's learning, so if she doesn't understand something, instead of, like I said, wasting all of that time to try and figure it out on her own, she just walks up to me and I'm like, okay, let's go over this. I can explain all of this to you, and then she'll be able to get that project done in an hour or two. She's really fast. but she's not afraid to ask questions, whether she thinks they're a really small question and she thinks that she should know it, or if it's something where she's like, I've never heard of this thing in my entire life, I don't know what you're talking about. She's not afraid to ask the questions.
That's a really good quality, you know, don't waste time, just cut right to it. On the other end of the spectrum, an intern that stuck out to me for not a great reason, she was an overshare, let's put it that way. We're sort of a younger office, and I think she felt like we were like girlfriends, which we were certainly friendly, but I don't want to know what you did in Vegas. You know, like it is work, and I am happy for you that you have a fun social life. Like, tell me at 5. You know, like it just keep in mind the setting. I guess it's great to be friendly with people, but you know, feel them out a little before you share your experience at Chippendales.
Well, I know Chippendales.
Yeah.
Okay, so good networking means blank.
So this is very, very important. It's a good question. It really, I think it starts with an understanding of shared interests. You know, I try not to network with pure self-interest involved. I try to, if I'm going to ask for somebody's time, I really try to be thoughtful about how that person's time is going to benefit from spending time with me. And so I think the best networking is when you can really, you know, so you sit down, you have mutual interest, and then the other thing, of course, is, it may go without saying, but maybe it needs re-emphasizing, is listening. You know, it's easy to talk, but it's sometimes harder to listen. What I mean by listen is not only hear what someone's saying, but really understand it, internalize it, and find where those shared interests are. So I'd say those.
I would just say too, don't be like shy to just, if you think you know someone, hey, I think I know you from so-and-so, or I saw you at this thing, or my professor mentioned you once. Just, you know, most people are pretty net friendly, so just be outgoing, be approachable.
Always have business cards on you.
Okay, great. So it is important for students to get involved in nonprofit work because of blank.
So for me, it's just so rewarding. I know that I'm not working for a for-profit company, and what I'm doing, I mean, it hits home, and it's just important work. I mean, if you ask people, do you know someone with Alzheimer's, or do you know someone that knows someone with Alzheimer's? More often than not, the answer is yes. So it's just really important work, and I see it every day in our office. We have a 24/7 helpline number, and we have anyone that calls in the Massachusetts or New Hampshire area, they go directly to our office if they call from 9 to 5. So we have people on the phone that are answering the phone and getting like the hardest conversations that you could ever imagine. So people will call and be like, so my mom was wandering and I don't know where she is, and we have to put out a silver alert, which is for a missing person. So it's just, they can be anything from that to, I'm a caregiver, I have not stopped working all day long, I just need someone to say hello to. So I mean, it's just hard-hitting work that really hits home for me, and really, it's just important, and you know what you're doing is important, because you see it in your communities.
To take that even one step further, it's just that nonprofits need it. We need young, dynamic, interesting people with fresh eyes and fresh ideas, and people who are on the cutting edge of technology and what's interesting and what's happening. They need it, so you're an asset.
Yeah, and I just, you know, would add from a big picture perspective, you know, the nonprofit community is like the bedrock of civil society, and you know, I suspect many of you agree with, you know, my political views. I won't get political, but I will say that in many respects, civil society is under attack right now, and we have to, nonprofits are the tissue through which people of different backgrounds, from different communities connect with each other around common purpose. And, you know, like you said, they need young ideas, they need idealism, they need energy, and they need, you know, human capacity. So, you know, it's really important. And again, it's not just a one-way street. It's as I hope, you know, we've all conveyed, you know, it's deeply satisfying and meaningful work too.
Okay, great. So we'll ask our last question to the panelists, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. The most important communication tool to the success of your job is blank.
I would say our communities. So we go out into our communities, we put out the awareness, but if it's not going any further than that, no one knows who we are. So us going out, networking, putting ourselves out there, if people in the communities, if we're not engaging with them and they're not talking about us, engaging with us, then what we're doing isn't working.
I would say, you know, it's the human relationships. It's you know, as important as, you know, all the digital media is. When we need someone to advocate and to tell the story of the power of the arts in a community or in a school, we will have needed to have a real strong relationship with that person, meaningful and mutual understanding. And so the cultivation of honest relationships, I think, you know, that builds the allies and the spokesperson for your work over time. So that's the investment that you have to make. I think it's kind of building on what you're saying.
I would say an open and honest line of communication with your colleagues, or like in my position with the executives, I need to be able to say to them, this is the situation we're looking at, this is what I think will happen, this is worst case scenario, this is best case scenario, this is what I need you to do. You know, I was afraid to sort of be that upfront, but if you're gonna, if they're going to trust that you're the one who's the professional at speaking for an institution or a group, you need to be able to say what you're thinking, and you need to have the confidence to say, this might be an issue, or this is our strength, this is where I think the good story is. You have to own up to it.
Thank you for very insightful and valuable answers. And in line of open communication and the spirit of open communication, we'd love to open it up to our wonderful students, faculty, and staff who are in the room. Obviously, some of you are comm majors, so this may be extremely relevant. Some of you come from different other majors. Yet, again, the nonprofit world, whether it's health, science, or the arts, have touched all of our lives somehow. So we would love to open it up for questions you may have.
I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on what types of audio and video production skills you guys use on a regular basis, and what type of production skills you would encourage public relations majors to learn before they graduate.
I think just going back to, you know, budgets are tight and staffing is tight, the more skills like that you have, the better. You're just going to make your life easier. So honestly, you can do almost everything on your phone now. So for me, like, figure out how to use like Photoshop, figure out how to use Instagram, like honestly, for business. Even things like GoPro, they have like this, they have great app, Splice, to make videos. It doesn't always have to be, you know, professional. If you have those skills, great. If you have time to learn them, if there's classes here that teach them, do it. But even if you can figure out like some good apps to have on your phone to make some infographics, you probably speak to this more, but it does go a long way.
I live on Illustrator, so that is my main source that I'm on every single day. But I also use video editing tools, and I was, when I interviewed for this position, they asked me if I had done courses and if I had what, skills I had, and I was able to say, like, yes, I took a video editing class, I took, courses on Photoshop and Adobe platforms. So we don't have a huge budget for, crazy equipment or anything like that, so we just have, like, the Canon cameras, and we use those in our phones. We have no budget for equipment. We actually had to come up with a budget for equipment days ago. So that's sad, but we just use, we use what we can, we use the resources that we have, and everyone puts in their skills on our communications team. It's only 3 people, and 1 person on our team is our web manager, but it's 3 of us using those resources that we have.
Thanks. I think that those are both good pieces of advice. I'm a little bit less on top, but we use video a lot at the Cultural Council now, much more so than we did when I started. In part because our executive director is a former television news anchor, and she's just excellent on TV, on video. I would just say that, but I would just caution, don't get too caught up at this stage, and you guys are so tech savvy, so much more so than I was, and generations before you. You can pick up things much more easily. Pay attention to the message. In other words, don't get so caught up in the medium that you forget what makes a good story, because that's the core. You can use a million different media, but you got to tell a compelling story. You got to tell it to the right audience in the right way, in the right time, and often that time is short, and so just kind of a reminder to always go back to those core principles.
So my question is for all of you, and basically, when you were starting out down this career path, what was one challenge that you faced, and how did you overcome it?
Like I had said before, I wasn't in a job when I started out that I was in this career path, but I knew it's where I wanted to go. So it was just putting myself out there. I knew how to do social media. I knew how to do public relations, but I didn't know how, when I was in the logistics position, to show that I could do that stuff, because there wasn't too much room for me to actually, show my skill in that area. So I just I made ways, basically, for me to show my skills. So what I did before was I packed for all of our 12 walks to end Alzheimer's, and I did logistics for it. I was like, what else can I do to show that I can do this and to move myself in that direction? So I just talked to my manager, and I said, listen, I think that we should be doing more social media. We should each walk should have their own event page, and we should be posting on it so people that are specific to that page know what's going on for that specific walk. He said, cool, you own that now. And I was like, yes, perfect. So that was my first step. So just don't give up, because every step that you take with purpose is going to lead you to the job that you want. And I'm happy to say that that's exactly what happened to me, and I was pretty much offered this job because of the steps that I had taken to get here.
One thing I'll say is, I was terrified to mess up. I was like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't even try this thing, because what if I don't do it right? Nobody is good at anything when they start. You have to be able to fail and say that's a way not to do it. That's not the end of my trying to do it, because it just never was going to go perfectly. And I was a reporter before this, so I felt like I didn't have a chance to mess up, because then it's in the newspaper and it's forever, but you just have to find people that you trust, let them talk you through it, be honest and open about it, and just know you're going to mess up, and you'll do that.
So I think of 2 things. When I began work as a journalist, it was the writing demands. I had always considered myself a good writer, but writing in college is very different than writing for an audience in a weekly or daily newspaper. And so it was about tailoring my language to those audiences and understanding how to speak to them in a different way. And frankly, it was about making my sentences shorter, making my words shorter. But that was incredible discipline, that I've carried with me all through my career. So that was one. And then, as I mentioned, making the transition from journalism into public relations, it required a definite psychological shift, because I had always seen myself as the outsider looking in, the critic, if you will. I wasn't technically a critic, but as a journalist, you're trained to have a critical eye. And now I was in the institution, defending and promoting the institution. That took a while, and I wasn't entirely comfortable when I started it, but I took some time, just kind of worked it, really got to know the institution and to really kind of understand how it worked. So those were the two biggest challenges I could think of early in my career.
Hi, I know in a lot of nonprofit organizations, there's a lot of attention to fundraising or development, and that depending on the size of the organization, you may or may not have a separate staff dealing with communications specifically for that. I think it's an area that our students are the least aware of in nonprofits, the whole development piece. So if you could talk a little bit about how your organization handles that, how you would recommend students might be prepared if they want to go down that path towards PR and fundraising specifically? Thank you.
So at the Museum of Science, we have an entire division of the staff that's we call them advancement, but same as development. And their sole purpose is donor relations and fundraising. And they do that through our board, our trustees, events, awards, fundraisers, just good old-fashioned networking and contacts. I guess the way to be aware of that stuff is to look at people's websites. A lot of fundraising is not interesting PR. It's like, hey, give us money. People say like, buy an ad if you want to say that. So the places where people are putting out this messaging is on social and on their websites. So if you want to get an idea of what that looks like, that's really the place to go.
Yeah, I completely agree. We have a whole development team. We have people that work specifically on the walks to End Alzheimer's. We have people that specifically work on donor relations that are more of like our higher end donors. We have exactly like what you said. So just, I would say the same thing, like look on our website, become aware of wherever you're looking at. Just research them. Research how they get their funding. Like on our website, you can find where all of our funding goes to. And yeah, same thing.
Thanks. Yeah. So I'm glad you asked that question because the organizations don't function without the resources and the development. The best nonprofit organizations are ones where the development and the communications teams are working hand in glove, working really, really well together. And I would, in answer to your question for the students, the development work is advancement, fundraising, whatever that is. It's really the flip side of communications. You're really doing the same thing, if you will. You're really talking to people about why it matters for them to support that institution, that organization, that mission. And in the communications world, we're doing it with journalists, in my case, with legislators, but the development people are doing it with individual donors, with corporations, with foundations. It's the same kind of work, it's just different audiences, and it's just as important. And I would definitely recommend looking at the Museum of Science, which is a fundraising juggernaut. I mean, they are unbelievably effective at raising money, to support their mission. So look at the way they do their work, and you find a good model there.
So before I came to Lasell, I was a journalist for 25 years. For every public relations person who made my job easier, there was one who made my job more difficult. So I wondered if you would just give some advice on tips that you've garnered that make your relationships with journalists better.
I would say the number one thing is availability. If somebody is emailing you, say, and they need something from you, that's because they're writing a story and they have a deadline and they need you to answer. And it's that simple. If you are willing to help them, you've made that connection. And if you are willing every time they ask to help them, then it just gets better and better. There are going to be times where you are not able to answer the questions that they're asking for a variety of reasons. If you have already helped them 10 times, that no goes down a lot smoother. And I would just say, reporters, if you think you're busy or strapped, reporters are more. Their deadlines are tighter, their staffs are smaller. It's a tough job. So when they're asking you a question, like, understand it's not to, bring down the organization. They probably just have a deadline. They need to fill a few more inches, help them where you can, and then when the hard stuff comes along, they maybe you grease the wheels a little.
I 100% agree with that, and I would also say we cultivate relationships with certain reporters that we feel a connection with. There are some reporters too that are like, oh, well, my mom has Alzheimer's or stuff like that, so we cultivate that relationship with them, and we'll just do check-ins. Like, we'll do stuff that we don't expect an email back from them. Like you said, they're 10 times busier than you are, but we just will send an email like, hey, just checking in, anything you need, let us know. If there's anything that we can do for you, let us know. But we cultivate relationships with reporters as much as we can.
Yeah, that's good advice. The other thing I would add is really do the research up front before you reach out to a journalist. Understand what he or she, what his or her area of interest is, what their beat is, what they cover, what they tend to like, what they're interested in, what their mandate is. Don't waste their time with something that isn't going to be within their sort of wheelhouse, and pitch it in the terms that they would understand. And so, a story for you as an institution is not necessarily a story for him or her. Try to put it's like any other communication with another person, is try to put yourself in that other person's shoes and understand what he or she is looking for before you reach out and do that sort of upfront research is really important.
I have a question. I don't think I need a mic. This is a bit of a case study question. I come from Framingham, and I'm part of 501c3 group, and maybe some of you know, we just became a city, and Devon Spicer, from the Museum of Science, is our new mayor.
Yeah.
So we're in a transition period. We started that transition in November before her election in January. Everything, this is a case study question, everything is on hold. And I'm curious as to how to approach development and fundraising relative to the important restoration of a building we've been working on with the town before we became a city. So do you have any advice, case study-wise, for how we handle this transition situation? Being very pleased we have Dr. Spicer with us.
Yeah, you're lucky. She's awesome. I would say that the easier that you can make it for someone else to digest your information and make a decision on it, the better. So preparing an answer to any question they could possibly ask just will speed up the process. Every document they could need and every issue that could arise. If you're prepared and ready to answer that, as soon as you get to start the process, nothing will hold you back, because sometimes the back and forth is what takes the longest time.
So we're going to say attention to detail and research.
Yes, just preparation, non-stop preparation.
Thank you.
So I would just say, one of the core principles of government relations, in the same way, it's actually very similar to journalism, what I just talked about with the journalists, is go and look at, probably have done this, but I'll just say it, especially for the students' benefit. Go and look at Yvonne Spicer's platform, right? What are her priorities? You know, what are the things she really cares about? What are the promises she made as a candidate? And how does your project align with those? That's the case you want to make.
We're sort of in a hiding.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do we have another question? Okay, so if no more questions, I will summarize the session by thanking you very, very much for all your insights. Greg taught us that you need to know yourself in order to make better career decisions. Caitlin taught us that the work that you're doing, especially in the nonprofit world, is not about you. It's about the communities that you're working with. And Erin taught us that it's okay to fail. There's probably no professional in the world who has not failed at something at some point. So thank you for all your lessons. Thank you, Professor Vicente, for moderating. And thank you for being great audiences. Please come and say hi and thank the panelists as well.